What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do 5 tips on how to take better snow portrait photos because it's currently snowing right now in upstate New York, but I want to switch it up a little bit. So I'm going to grab 3 random or interesting items from around the house here to incorporate into the portrait photos. So I'm going to go grab 3 items and then we'll catch back up and see what we've gathered to incorporate into the portrait photos. Let's get going. Alright, and for the final item, we're going to go with a fire extinguisher. Actually, no, that is way too dangerous. We need to think of something a little safer. Instead, we're going to use this axe because that's definitely safer than a fire extinguisher. Alright, so we gathered our 3 items from around the house. Before we head outside, tip number 1, and that is to use some sort of interesting item or prop in your photos to give the photo some interest. In the winter it can be hard because your photos end up looking pretty whitewashed and bland, so a nice pop of color or an interesting prop can give the viewer something to look at and result in a more interesting and intriguing photo. Let's get outside and start shooting. Okay, so it actually started to snow pretty hard outside here, so I don't have any BTS content of me shooting outside with the umbrella, but I know that for this shoot, I want to freeze the snowflakes in motion as they are falling down, which brings me to tip number 2, and that is to know what your shutter speed does. A fast shutter speed will freeze snowflakes in motion, whereas a longer shutter speed will give your photo those cool snow streaks moving down the page. So tip number 2 is to be intentional with your shutter speed. There's no right or wrong answer here. If you want frozen snowflakes in motion, you can do that. Just be intentional with your shutter speed to get some cool winter portraits. I used a truck to backlight these photos to make the snowflakes pop and illuminate them from behind. And then I used the umbrella and the red jacket as our props to make myself stand out more. Alright, our next prop is the axe. So for this one, I'm thinking a campfire outside theme where we're lighting up the snow or fog or whatever. But I want to do this on the frozen lake outside. So we're going to have to wait for it to get dark, and then outside Luke will explain what's happening next. Alright guys, I ran back up to the house to grab the axe and a few other things, and now we're ready for round 2 of our photos. We already used our umbrella, so now we're on to prop number 2, which is the axe. So this photo shoot is going to be for the axe. But before we set up our next scene, this actually brings me to tip number 3, and that is to use some sort of lighting. In the winter, you have a lot of snow and fog, which plays really nicely with different types of lighting. So like you saw in the last shots, we used the headlights as our backlight, and that played really well with the snow. Now we're going to be using a firelight to play well with the fog, so just use light sources in your photos. Now let's take these epic photos, because I'm telling you, they're going to be sick. Let's go. Alright, so I think the framing is going to look something like this. So we have the fire in the background, then I'm going to be holding the axe above the fire. Hopefully it looks pretty cool. Let's see. Okay, so those are the axe photos, I guess. Don't even say it. I know that photo shoot may have actually been more focused on the lantern than the axe, but if you zoom in real close, you can see I was in fact holding the axe in those photos. Okay, fine, I'll go back out and I'll shoot some more photos with the lantern. Are you happy? Are you happy now? This is your fault. Okay, I'll go back outside. Okay, we went back outside and took some more photos with the lantern, which brings me to tip number 4, and that is to use auto exposure bracketing. Most cameras have this built in, but just a quick explanation. Your camera basically takes 3 photos, one underexposed, one correctly exposed, and then one overexposed. and then you can merge those 3 photos together in Lightroom so your highlights aren't blown out, and then your shadows aren't underexposed. So this just helps increase the dynamic range on your camera. If you want a full explanation on that, I just released a video on that, so click the card up here to watch that auto exposure bracketing tip/hack video where I explain it more. But anyway, you can use auto exposure bracketing for your winter portraits to increase the dynamic range of your photos. So go ahead and do that. Just remember, you have to stand very still when you're taking these photos to help when you merge them together in post. Alright, my 5th tip is to shoot in RAW and full manual settings. I know a lot of us are still stuck in auto on our cameras, but at least in the winter, for your winter portraits to make them look better, you want to manually expose your scenes. And that is because cameras have a really hard time understanding snow, both in the white balance scales and in your exposure scales. So that's why snow can often be super underexposed or super overexposed or super blue. So you want to shoot in RAW and full manual so that if it gets your white balance wrong, you can adjust that in post because you're shooting in RAW. Alright guys, these are my 5 tips on how to take better winter portraits. On your way out of here, go down there and hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.